Thanks for having me. Let me just see if those slides. Awesome, thanks. So yeah, as you heard, I'm the project coordinator for Living Lab Central Prairies. The project is a large collaboration though, so I'm representing a lot of people here today. Our general manager is Kelly Williamson. We also have on our leadership team Tom Harrison as our producer engagement and knowledge transfer lead, and Dr. Mike Schellenberg as our science lead. And we also depend on a large network of supporters and partners on this project. So that includes the Stock Growers Association and the Stock Growers Foundation, other industry groups, NGOs, and a large university component. So the University of Saskatchewan has a strong involvement in our project, University of Alberta and University of Waterloo. And our primary funder for this project is Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. And they also provide research and technical support to the project. So today I'm going to talk a bit about Living Labs in general, and then about our context within the Central Prairies Living Lab more specifically, our process and some of our early takeaways from our collaboration, and a bit of the path forward for the project. I'm also going to try out some interactive components to this presentation. So if you have a device with you, either a computer or a phone, you can join the polls by going to slido.com. So that's SLIDO.com. It'll prompt you for a code, and you can enter this code. So you can either do that now, and it'll probably say no polls are active, but when we get to the slides, the questions will pop up for you. And that information will appear again, so. Okay, so the Living Lab concept isn't unique to our project or to agriculture. It's an approach to innovation that spans different industries and contexts. And basically it's about bringing together diverse collaborators and centering the needs of the users of a practice or technology so that they can work together to develop practical solutions to overcome challenges they might face or to increase benefits that they want to see more of in their industry. And so I just want to rest on that concept of benefits or increasing benefits of prairie agriculture for a minute. So our first poll question today is, what benefits of prairie agriculture do you value? What's top of mind for you? What do you think needs more attention from other managers or from policymakers in terms of the benefits that prairie agriculture produces? So that might be, food products, it might be financial benefits, it might be environmental benefits or cultural benefits. Okay, and you can put in multiple answers as well. So, depending how fast you type. All right. Yeah, and I think if you can keep typing as this, it'll keep changing as you add things. So yeah, sustainability coming out as the top value here today, and food security also big. I can't see all those very well. You can see them. But yeah, carbon sequestration showing up. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for all of those values. And Living Labs are great because they bring the complexity and all these values to the fore. So when we're working with people who work in this industry, work on the ground every day, you start to appreciate all of the many considerations that go into management decisions. And also the fact that when you start to try and influence one element of that system, you're going to have effects on all these different values. So to their credit, Agriculture Canada recognizes through their programming that they need to include some of this complexity in their policy making process and in their science that they're undertaking. And so they've created this national network of living lab projects. There's been a couple of iterations of the program, but there's living labs in every province now, focused on agroecosystems specifically. And in this iteration of the project, it's funded by through the Agricultural Climate Solutions program. So the primary purpose of our project and of the projects active right now, funded through this program, is to identify and increase adoption of practices that sequester carbon, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and provide other co-benefits. So, as I mentioned, the project is led by the South of the Divide Conservation Action Program and includes more than 30 core producers, researchers from several institutions, and the supporter and stakeholder organizations you saw early on. And SODCAP, you may be familiar with, was formed in 2014 to address species at risk conservation issues on native rangelands. And this organization wanted to be involved in defining climate solutions so that those native rangelands and cattle producers, well, livestock producers in general, could be part of the climate solutions discourse and weren't overlooked when climate solutions were being defined for the prairies. And so the South of the Divide region is in the southwest corner of the province, but for this project, the organization expanded out and is working with producers from across the prairie ecoregions. And this is a key part of the project because we wanted to make sure that when we're defining beneficial management practices, we can understand how ecoregion or soil zone is, how important that factor is in defining what is a BMP for which producer. So do BMPs vary across that region? And in formulating the approach to this living lab, we needed somewhere to start in terms of what practices we were going to include in the investigations. And one of the questions we asked early on is, what can we learn from the prairie ecosystems that we have in Saskatchewan and the strategies or traits that are on display in those systems that make them productive and resilient over the long term? So I want to ask that question of the room here. So what are some of the things that we can learn from prairie systems or strategies that we could apply in our management that help ensure their resilience? Okay, so this is great. The number one strategy you're talking about is diversity, grazing, planning for the long term. So yeah, our group came up with a lot of these same key features. And so, again, we know that prairies are large reservoirs of carbon. And so we asked, what are the features that are present there that allow them to function that way? And then how can we apply those features to other forms of agriculture in the prairies? And so, just like you mentioned, we came up with the diversity of these systems. So there's plants that can thrive in all kinds of different conditions, land uses that work in different contexts and moments in time or space. There's the perenniality of our grasslands. So they're going to have deep roots in place year-round that can constantly be adding carbon to the soil and ensuring that plants are ready to grow when conditions are right. These systems are also grazed, and that's an important part of how they sustain themselves. And then finally, they're dynamic, and I think that was captured a bit in some of that responsible management, long-term planning, adaptive planning that people mentioned. People and their responses and their actions are such an important part of the success of these systems over the long term. And basically, following a prescription over the long term won't work. Management has to be dynamic and adaptive. And so taking those features, we came up with these 4 sort of umbrella categories for beneficial management that we were interested in investigating. So that includes just keeping prairie in place in the first place, so avoiding land use conversion of grasslands, riparian areas, and other naturalized areas that hold some of those benefits of diversity and perenniality. Obviously, managing grazing impacts, so manipulating how we graze and rest rangelands and pastures. Promoting perennials, so restoring native grasslands in some cases, planting tame species even, and rejuvenating old pastures by adding diversity, say by sod seeding legumes is another practice we're looking at. And then finally, polycropping is one of the practices that we're looking at where we can take some of those principles from diverse grazed grasslands and maybe apply them to cropland management. So adding a lot more species so that roots can occupy different strata in the soil, and adding the grazing element as part of the nutrient cycling processes on croplands. And so we have producers, you saw on the map, across the prairies implementing these practices. Almost 100% of our participants are doing some form of grazing management. And then we have about 10 sites that we're looking at native restoration on, and a couple of sites where we're monitoring the effects of pasture rejuvenation. And then again, about 10 sites where there's polycropping going on annual cropland. And then at the same time, our research team is doing all kinds of monitoring of the results of those practices. So there's soil samples being taken to look at the impacts of these practices on carbon storage, greenhouse gas cycling, cycling of other nutrients, and soil microbial communities. There's plant surveys and biomass sampling happening. We're taking livestock data in collaboration with producers, doing some modeling as well to understand livestock performance. There's also a large biodiversity component. So we have teams monitoring insect communities and bird communities on the landscapes where these practices are happening. And then finally, there's a large component looking at the social and economic dimensions of implementing these practices. So what is the profitability at the farm scale? How are the costs and benefits apportioned, on individual operations versus publicly? And what drives people to adopt or disadopt these practices? So what's the potential for growth of these kinds of practices in our region? And so we've had a few years so far with many crews out in the field collecting samples. You've got a punch truck on the left taking soil cores down to a meter to make sure we're understanding where all the carbon is stored in the soil strata. Weather data being monitored at most of our sites, and then those samples all being taken back and processed in labs and numbers being crunched. And so coming back to that living lab approach, producers themselves are at the heart of this, and their insights and observations are crucial to understanding, how these BMPs might work as BMPs or not. And then we need to make sure that we're coming back together, producers with researchers and other stakeholders, to reflect on why is this working, what are you finding, what might be missing when we're out there monitoring, or when we're analyzing the data. So we come together at least annually as a large group in sort of formal co-development context, and then there's also lots of conversations happening all the time between peer-to-peer conversations and producers with researchers to shape the direction of the project. And so a lot of those results are still, the scientific results, or like the soil carbon data, is still being processed. But we've learned a lot from each other already from our discussions and from what we've been trying. So some of our early takeaways from the project are, surprise, surprise, drought is a huge factor in the success of BMPs, when we can implement them, maybe how long it takes for benefits to be realized. And producers are always having to make decisions and adapt based on the risk of drought. So it's something, obviously, that policy needs to consider, and we need to consider in our timelines for monitoring the effects of these practices. Another thing that we've heard a lot from the producers involved in our project is that adaptiveness, as well as their local knowledge, is crucial to the success of a given practice. So we're unlikely to be able to define BMPs in ways that they will always be beneficial. They need to be wielded by a thoughtful, knowledgeable producer or manager in order for those benefits to be realized. So that was an interesting element that was added to the project, was to try and actually capture some of the degree of adaptiveness of different people, different producers involved in the project, and see if that is an influential factor in how many benefits are observed on their place. Also, we talk a lot about the complexity. So managers are considering so many different dimensions of their choices and all the different consequences, and they're making decisions based on many different factors, and so that can be really challenging for science to take account of, and it's a challenge that's being taken up by researchers involved in the project to be able to find ways of cutting through the noise and answering some of the questions that we need to understand about these practices. And that comes through, sustained engagement, conversation, and understanding. And then through some of the social science work, we're seeing that the benefits that we emphasize will really affect how our messages are received. And maybe that seems obvious, but when we start to learn more about the priorities and what people are basing their management decisions on, it helps us understand, how we might be able to influence uptake of these different practices. And so this is going to be the last poll question, and this is a question that social scientists have been asking our participants and other people in the region. And so I might need someone to tell me, are you getting options on your poll to rank? Okay, great. So there should be 8 options, and you don't need to rank them all, but if you want to pick, your top priorities when you're making decisions. about management. Okay, so currently in the #1 spot, adapting to drought. And #2, having a viable operation to hand over to the next generation. Then profitability in the short term, improving soil health, biodiversity. Carbon made it on there. And then habitat. So we know that a lot of the practices that we're wanting to promote and the benefits that we're wanting to promote are multi-purpose. So to be able to understand that, you know, drought preparedness is top of mind, that means that we need to better articulate those benefits when we're talking about, you know, what practices should be adopted. When the survey results I'm going to show next are from agricultural producers, 400 agricultural producers that were surveyed across the prairies. And so these are not necessarily livestock producers, but they're just within the region of the study area. So in this survey, improving soil health was top of mind. But then just like you answered, handing over a viable operation to the next generation was in the #2 spot, and then adapting to drought. And one of the interesting things about these results is that in this survey, storing and sequestering carbon in the soil was the lowest priority. But we also know that storing carbon is highly correlated with soil health. And so it shows us that we need to be, you know, speaking each other's language and speaking about soil health benefits and drought preparedness benefits, and maybe not so much about carbon benefits. So we're really excited about where the project has taken us so far, and the path forward for us is to continue cultivating the relationships that we've been building, learning from each other, and crucially linking the knowledge that we're generating with action on the ground. So figuring out how we can expand our impact as we learn more about these practices. A couple things I want to make sure that I leave you with are that the BMPs that we're looking at are still being defined. So if you have views or experiences that you want to share with our project, we're always looking for people to talk to. Our social scientists are always looking for people to interview. So definitely reach out if you want to be part of defining these practices. So yeah, thanks again for the opportunity to speak today. And if you have any questions, I don't know if there's time now, or you can always, we have a trade show booth out there, so you can always come talk to us at the booth.